Hello, my name is John Olson, and I'd like to show you a video that will make you think about what happens next after death. Is there an afterlife? This video will take you through the history of views on the afterlife, starting with the ancients, the Egyptians, then going to the Navajos, then looking at the agnostic point of view, the atheistic point of view, the Hindu point of view, the Buddhist point of view, the Islam point of view, the point of view of Judaism, and finally the point of view of Christianity. A lot to think about. You'll have to take it slowly, and hopefully you'll have some good thoughts about what happens next. Take care and enjoy the video.
What was the ancient Egyptian afterlife like, and why did the ancient Egyptians put so much effort into getting there? In this video, you'll learn the 3 things that you need to know to understand what the ancient Egyptian afterlife was like and why you'd want to be there. Welcome to Voices of Ancient Egypt, where we demystify the words and lives of the ancient Egyptians through animated videos like this one. If you're new here, I'd love to have you subscribe and hit that bell icon so you don't miss future videos like this one. The ancient Egyptians had what might seem to us very strange and complex beliefs about what life after death was like and how to prepare for it. So what was the point of it all? The point was, in fact, not to obsess over death, but rather to overcome it and be able to live on forever in what we now call the afterlife. But what was the ancient Egyptian afterlife actually like? Let's jump into the 3 things that you need to know about the ancient Egyptian afterlife to understand why they spent so much time and money preparing for it. Number 1. There was no one single accepted idea of what the afterlife was like. This might seem like the weirdest part of all, but the ancient Egyptians had many different interpretations and ideas about religious concepts such as the afterlife. Some traditional beliefs were certainly more popular in some places and in some time periods than others, but the ancient Egyptians seem to have had no issues at all with there being varying viewpoints on these topics. So, if there were multiple beliefs about what the afterlife was like, what were they? I'm so glad you asked, because that leads us to Number 2. The afterlife could mean living among the gods, the sun, and the stars in the sky. This idea was especially common for kings, but it expanded to more people over time. In this version of the afterlife, the person could live among the stars, hang out with the moon god, or even ride in the sun god's boat, which the sun used to travel through the sky during the day and then through the underworld during the night. Is all of this making sense so far? If so, let me know by writing afterlife in the comments below. Number 3. The afterlife could mean living in an even better version of ancient Egyptian rural life forever. You could think of this version of the ancient Egyptian afterlife as a type of paradise, but you won't find any angels sitting on clouds here. Instead, this place, which was often called the Field of Reeds by the ancient Egyptians, was much like life in ancient Egypt before death, only better. This location was ruled by the god Osiris and was sometimes envisioned as being under the earth, and at other times was thought of as being up above the sky. As in life, this version of the afterlife could include things like being reunited with your family, eating, drinking, and even making love. But it also potentially included having to work. To make the afterlife even better than the first life and to avoid this type of physical labor, the ancient Egyptians planned ahead. They often included in their burials small figurines of workers called shabtis, who could take their place if they were called to work in the afterlife. The 2 main versions of the afterlife that I've described here may seem to conflict with each other, but because the ancient Egyptians believed that every person had multiple parts to them that separated after death, including the Ba, the Ka, and the Akh, people could conceivably be in many places at once. Therefore, you might be in your tomb, in the field of reeds with Osiris, and in the sun god's boat, all at the same time. So which version of the afterlife would you want to live in forever? Would you want to live in the sky with the gods? Or would you prefer to live a better version of everyday life in the field of reeds?
Our life does not end when we expire from this, the third world. It continues on. The teachings of our people about the life after we expire from this, the third world, and go into the fourth world, is mentioned in many of the ceremonies and that, the songs and the prayers. And when you are familiar with the ceremonies, like for example, the Hojong or the Beauty Way, there's the prayer that just simply says, you know, that the let there be joy, happiness, confidence, and peace before me. Let there be joy, happiness, confidence, and peace behind me. Let there be joy, happiness, confidence, and peace below me. And let there be joy, happiness, confidence, and peace above me. And so it is that when you make your determination that you're going to travel on this yellow corn pollen path, and that you understand that this is the yellow world, and so you make your promises in your prayer that you're going to maintain your journey on that yellow corn pollen path. And that yellow corn pollen path eventually leads into the next world, which is the white world. And it is said, when they refer to it in the songs and the prayers, they say sa sa anare bikahojo. That means beyond old age there is joy, happiness, confidence, and peace. Sa ma So it is that our life does not end when we expire from this, the third world. It continues on. And so when we bury people after they have passed on, after their spirit has left their body, and the spirit, by the way, exits this physical form that we are right here at the top of the head, where it entered when we were brought into existence in this world. And so as our life ends and expires in this, the third world, the spirit will exit at the top of the head where the spiral is as well, as we journey into the next world. But when the body is without the spirit, it is at that time. The preparations were simple. If a person died inside the hogan, they would make that hogan the official tomb of the one that passed away inside of that hogan. And they would refer to it as hok egan. And that means there is no living being there, but there is a remains of someone. And so it was that one of the ways that they would prepare the body when they put it inside of the hogan is that they would set it up in a fetal position where the deceased would be made, so they sometimes even tied the legs so that they would be able to maintain that fetal position. And it was that they didn't cover the body. They might put some rocks in that to keep it so that it is facing the doorway, the entryway to the direction east. And it is said that this is to prepare the body of the individual who passes on, so in case that that they need that body, that they are in the being born position, which is the fetal position. When you're born into this, the third world, you are born from a fetal position until your body leaves that of your mother, and with only the umbilical cord attached. So it is that when the burial was done among our people, that's how it was performed. And so many times when the old people would refer to their departed fathers or mothers or grandparents and other relatives, they would say, "Ajahn," which means that is where your grandfather or your grandmother is sitting in a fetal position. Just Jol. That's how they would say it. But the other way is to lay out the body out in the open and to stack rocks on it, either in that fetal position and to have it facing the direction east. And then you would put rocks all over the body and pack the rocks from the outside. And that would be the original way to bury people. And so it is that the afterlife, as we refer to it, actually is a continuation of life. And it is where there is greater joy, greater happiness, and greater confidence, and greater peace. So it is so much better there than in many ways what it is here. So when we refer to it in the beauty way ceremony, we refer to the prayer that is made, "Let there be joy, happiness, confidence, and peace before me, behind me, below me, and above me." And it is that my existence, even after old life, will be filled with joy, happiness, confidence, and peace. And that's what we are told.
Well, the Heavens on Earth was something of an extension of my previous books. I've not covered the afterlife in any kind of detail from my previous books on the paranormal, the supernatural, religion, God, morality. And so this was sort of a natural extension of, well, if you're skeptical of all these other things, what about the afterlife? And you know, my standard one-liner is, I'm for it. But the fact that I'm for it doesn't make it true. In fact, if anything, the more passionately we want something to be true, the more skeptical we should be of our own beliefs, because we know how powerful these cognitive biases are to lead us to want to find evidence for what we already want to be true. So I really kind of went in search of just all the standard religious theories of the afterlife and heaven. I go through the big three monotheisms: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And you know, right there, all of them have a history in the sense of all the different versions that there are of the afterlife and heaven. And they're quite different histories than, say, if you read a history of cosmology, which sort of shows a progression from the ancients through the scientific revolution, you know, through the early modern period, all the way up to today, of us getting closer and closer to an understanding of the real nature of the cosmos. But there's nothing like that in religious histories of the afterlife. They're all scattershot. This theory. There's no sense of progress. So that alone tells us that these are culturally determined, geographically located, like reincarnation, the belief that we come back in this world, our souls somehow migrate into other bodies. Why do they seem to hover, all those souls, in the subcontinent of India? You know, there's very few other places around the world where the souls seem to go. That's an indication that these things are not real out there in the real world sense, but real inside people's heads as determined by their cultures. But the core of Heavens on Earth really is the scientific search for the afterlife. And so this is what I do, science writing and research in scientific areas. Believe it or not, this is no longer a fringe idea, this idea that we could live forever. There are scientists today who say that the first person to live 1,000 years is alive today. Okay, I'm skeptical. Okay, but still, these aren't fringe nuts. These are billionaires like Peter Thiel, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, the Google guys, Larry and Sergey, have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in this company, Calico. Ray Kurzweil is their chief engineer and who believes in the singularity. So this whole idea of radical life extension, cryonics, transhumanism, the singularity, we're going to upload our minds into a computer. These form the core center of my book and why I'm skeptical, why really all of us should be skeptical. Because first, although it's not impossible that these researchers and scientists are wrong, it's just very unlikely because the problems of, say, duplicating your soul, whatever that would be. In science, that would be your pattern of information, your genome, and then the equivalent of that, your connectome, that is the tracings of all your memories, everything that's you, This is their theory. You copy it and you upload it into a computer. Let's say you have it backed up every night, and when you die, you just put it into a clone or inside a computer or something like that. That's the idea. And I think the underestimation of the complexity of the problem is orders of magnitude off. We are not even close to doing anything like this. I mean, Ray Kurzweil projects 2040 is the singularity, and after that, we might be able to live forever. How is that going to happen, and who's the we? Okay, so then I have a chapter on who are we? Who are you? What does it mean to be you? And so their idea is that if we just copied your memories, it would be you. Stop right there. Which memories? At what age? 20, 30, 50, 60? The memories are not stored in there like videotape, like you just play it back on the theater of your mind and there it is, what really happened when you were 15 or whatever. No, they're constantly edited and changed. Those neural networks are reworked constantly. So there's no real you in any snapshot sense of that moment right there is the time when you're you. No such thing. And then finally there's the through your eyes perspective, what's called the point of view self. So the memory self, mem self, is what I just described. And then there's the point of view self, which is me looking out of my eyes at you right now and you looking out at me. And now when I go to sleep tonight, there's a disruption in my conscious point of view, but it comes back in the morning. And if I go under general anesthesia, it's gone for a couple hours, it comes back. A little groggy at first, but poof, it comes clear. If I died and then copied my brain and put it in a computer, turned the computer on, am I suddenly inside the computer looking out the little camera hole? I don't think so. And here's why. Because if we did this while you were alive, let's say the current technology would be that after you die, we take your brain out and slice it and scan every single synaptic connection and then take that big data mass and put it into a computer. Now, in the future, we maybe in 500 years or something, we could scan your brain while you're living and scan through sophisticated MRI type technology every single neural connection. Let's say we could do that now and get your connectome and put it into a computer while you're standing right there alive. So we turn it on. Who's that in there in the computer when you're standing right there? Okay, you see the problem, because you're not going to be standing there going, yeah, there I am in the computer. No, you're going to be standing there going, nah, I'm me. No more than a twin would look at their other twin and go, yeah, there I go. No. So I don't think even if they could accomplish the technology of it, it's still not you being put into the future in terms of an afterlife. And by the way, I think religions have the same problem. When Christians talk about you're going to wake up with Jesus up in heaven. Okay, but I'm actually still down on the ground there. No, that's your body, your soul. Wait, what is the soul? It's all your memories and it's you. Which part of me is going to heaven? What age? And so on. Same problem. It's just a copy going to heaven. I'm still in the ground. So I'm still dead. It's just some copy of me. I'm not waking up in heaven through my point of view. Okay, so that's the core of the book. And then the subtitle of the book, The Scientific Search for the Afterlife, Immortality, and Utopia. So I do approach the problem of creating heavens on earth. Like if we can't live forever, maybe we can create a perfect world here. No, a heaven. No, you can't. You can't do it. This is why they've always failed. Utopias always fail because there is no such place. That's the very definition of utopia. Nowhere. There's no such place as perfect because we're so variable and people differ in their needs and wants and desires that this has, if anything, been a dystopia. The search for utopia has led to dystopia because we all vary. So even that doesn't work. So I conclude then at the end sort of a discussion of what does it all mean? Where do we find meaning and purpose in life if this is all there is? And if you think about it, even if there is an afterlife, even if there is a heaven, this is the most important thing now, not the hereafter, but the here and now. And the relationships you have and how you engage with the world and other people. That's what counts now. So make the most of it.
Money Mandahar on Instagram. It's no secret you're fascinated with the afterlife. What are your beliefs on the afterlife, and what do you think happens when someone passes away?
The trouble is, I think nothing happens. I don't believe in organized religion or religion. I can't make that leap of faith. I've never seen anyone return. I've never gotten a message. When I had heart surgery, I didn't see clouds or white, bright lights. I know that people say they've seen it, and I respect that, and I hope they're right.
Okay.
So I can hope. Hope is different from belief.
Sure.
My wife is a true believer. She'll say things like, her uncle died, I'll see him on the other side. And whenever I ask, where is the other side? And what form of them will you see them in? What does the spirit look like? I think it's all, my theory is this.
Okay.
Man came from the monkeys and gorillas. I think that's obvious. All you got to do is look at gorillas and monkeys. We evolved and walked on 2 feet. And then man was walking around with women. And one day he fell down.
Okay.
And they looked at him and he didn't get up. He wasn't sleeping. He didn't get up. And he didn't get up. And then he started to smell bad, So they put him in the ground. What else? Where are you going to put him? Put him in the ground. And then someone had to say, some smart guy had to say, this is it. I think it's all religion is based on death. If you didn't die, there'd be no religion. Wow. So what it does is encourage the masses. Karl Marx called it the opiate of the masses, which I believe it is. I don't think my wife is nuts. I don't think my father-in-law is nuts. I think they all firmly believe, but I think it's superstition based on this desire to want to know you're going somewhere. It makes you feel good.
Yeah.
And you can't be proven wrong.
That's true.
Because if you're dead and you go somewhere, you were right. If you don't go somewhere, you don't know it.
And nobody knows.
It's a win-win.
That's true.
I can't make the leap. That's a long answer, but I can't make the leap.
What made you actually lose your faith?
Very good question. I lost my faith by not getting answers to questions. Every religious leader has never answered questions like, okay, man has free will, right? What did that have to do with Katrina? If God is omnipotent, could he have prevented the monsoon? So I lost my faith right after my bar mitzvah. I started asking rabbis questions because they encouraged me to ask questions. Then I would ask questions of I interviewed, except for the Pope, every major religious leader. Head of the Russian Orthodox Church, head of the Mormon Church, Catholic bishops, James Pike, the Episcopal bishop, and there's one that they never have an answer, and their same answer is, we don't question the ways of the Lord, or the Lord has a plan. Do you believe that some mystical figure up there has a plan for you, and the plan might be to blow you away in a hurricane? And then the Lord of the first of the Old Testament, I didn't like him at all.
Okay.
So if I'm supposed to love this God, I instead was taught to fear him. You be good or.
One of the most important decisions related to belief that we make in our life is whether to believe in the concept of rebirth or not to believe it. This becomes a game changer in regard to values. For example, if there is no next life, then this life is all there is. We are created upon birth and we cease to exist upon death. In that case, there are not deep consequences of our actions. This leads to a materialistic viewpoint. Eat, drink, and be merry. The Indian materialistic philosopher Charvak stated, Yavat jivet sukham jivet trinam kritva ghritam pivet bhasmi bhutasya dehasya punaragamanam kuta. This life is only of 4 days. Whatever gives you happiness, do it. If you get happiness from ghee, clarified butter, beg, borrow, or steal, but drink that butter. Don't worry about the hereafter. The Nyaya Darshan says, Asti parlok ityevam dridhamatir yasya sa astika. This one point differentiates the believer from the non-believer. The believer is who? The agnostic is who? One who believes there is an afterlife, because that person's value system will be different. He will feel whatever I do have consequences. Let me ensure my actions are pure. On the other hand, one who says there is no hereafter will say you can get away with whatever you do. So, what is the basis of belief in rebirth? Can it be scientifically established? Astonishingly, the Bhagavad Gita gives us the most powerful logic for the establishment of rebirth. Sri Krishna says, Dehinosmen yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tatha dehantara praptir dhiras tatra na muhyati. He says, Arjun, your body is continuously changing in this life itself. From birth to childhood to youth to old age. Take a look at your family album. There's a 2-year baby, you say, that is me. Then there is a 10-year-old, you say, that is me. There is a young adult getting married, that is me. There is a middle-aged person, that is also me. Now, which is you amongst all these? If you were the body, you have changed so many times. The soul has changed so many bodies in one lifetime itself. Scientists estimate that within 7 years, all the cells in the body, they die out, new cells get generated in their place. Which means that within 7 years, we've got a completely new body. Sri Krishna says, in the same way, at the time of death as well, just as it did during life, the soul changes bodies. The enlightened soul is not bewildered by such a change. Again, the Bhagavad Gita says, Vasansi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grihnati naro parani tatha sharirani vihaya jirnanyanyani sayati navani dehi. In the morning, we get up, we take off our old clothes, and after bath, we put on a new set of clothes. We don't change. We change our clothes. Similarly, what we call the phenomenon of death is not the end of the existence of the soul. It is the soul changing its clothes, which is the body. This also explains why there is so much of a difference between different children right from the point of birth. There have been child prodigies like Mozart, who was a genius, creating music at the age of 4. How did this come about? The phenomenon of rebirth explains it was his activities in the past life which impelled him to possess that musical propensity in this life. Similarly, the concept of rebirth also explains why some are more unfortunate than the others right from birth. If a child is born blind and that child asks, "What did I do to be born blind?" what will you answer that child? If you say it was the will of God, that will not be believed, because God is kind, compassionate. He is the loving Father. Why will He want anybody to be born blind? The only logical answer to this is that it is due to actions in the past life. Without accepting the concept of past life, all creation then becomes illogical. The moment we bring this concept into our framework of knowledge, there becomes a logic and a purpose behind all creation, which is the gradual evolution of the soul towards the ultimate perfection of God realization. The Nyaya Darshan gives another proof of the existence of God. It says, Stanya Bhilashat. A little baby, how can it come to know how to suck milk from the mother's breast? The baby is too small to understand lectures and tutorials. How can the mother explain to it, my child, when I put my breast in your mouth, this is how you are to drink? The Nyaya Darshan says, the child has drunk the mother's milk in innumerable lifetimes in the past, even in the animal species. And that is why when the mother puts her breast in the child's mouth, the child, having those recollections of the past, immediately starts drinking. There is another piece of evidence proposed by the Nyaya Darshan for the existence of rebirth. It states, Jatasya harsha shoka bhaya sampratipataha. Take a look at a little baby. Without reason, that baby sometimes becomes fearful, sometimes becomes joyous, sometimes becomes morose and miserable. Why the fluctuation of moods in a little baby? The Nyaya Darshan is saying it is remembering things from its past life. How does that work? You see, the process of death is such that a whole lot of impressions in our memory bank are wiped out by the pain of death. And then the pain of rebirth is even more than the pain of death for the baby. A whole lot of more impressions are wiped out, and yet a few residual memories do remain with that little baby. They are causing the baby to become joyous, miserable, fearful. But then as the baby tends to grow up, the impressions of this life fall so strongly upon the child that they erase the impressions of the past life completely. Beta, my child, I am your mother. Yes, mommy. I am your father. Yes, papa. Now the new impressions are falling strongly. Nevertheless, many times children have the experience of deja vu. What is deja vu? Oh, I've seen this before. This concept of deja vu is widely accepted. That what is going on? The memories are there in the subconscious. They are coming out. A person is unable to perceive why a situation is seeming familiar. When I was growing up, when I was an 8-year-old, there was a little girl in our neighborhood. She was about 5 years. And her mother was a friend of my mother. Her mother would tell my mother that my child sits and reads the namaz. Born in the Hindu household at the age of 5, without any exposure to Mohammedan customs, she sits in that Vajrasana and placing her hands like this, reads the namaz. She would say, I do not encourage her. I don't wish her to remember too much. 1 year later, I asked my mother, and she said her friend has told her that the daughter has now forgotten. There have been innumerable instances of people remembering their past lives all around the world in all cultures. Now, these are all exceptions to the rule. The rule is that we forget, but as an exception, a few people remember, thereby giving us yet another reason to believe that world and life are not irrational and illogical. Whatever we do stays with us. We have the opportunity to build our destiny and grow to the highest perfection from lifetime to lifetime. And that is why we should be optimistic, we should be cheerful, keeping our faith in this concept of rebirth.
Simply, the mind continues, because as we've discussed in previous times, the mind is a stream of awareness which is not generated from physical causes. And so although the as it were, the hotel of the body collapses at the moment of death, collapses as a suitable kind of receptacle for the stream of consciousness, the stream of consciousness travels on. And therefore, what happens, as it were, to that stream is dependent to a large extent upon what are the imprints, the karmic imprints, that come to dominate at the time of death. Those are the drivers that push the stream of consciousness towards rebirth. That is to say, if one hasn't, as it were, cut through that chain of karmic impressions through developing wisdom, transcendental wisdom in one's life, then one is still subject to its influence, and the mind therefore will be driven on to rebirth. But immediately at the time of death, the mind experiences a kind of gap, a kind of space or gap between the moment of death of one lifetime and the arising into the next life within one of the samsaric realms. And we call this, the Tibetan term for this is bardo, or like intermediate state. Actually, there's an intermediate state here and now, present in this very moment, even in this so-called kind of embodied life. The bardo is merely the presence of ultimate reality, which is there at all times, and which is most evident in the space between thoughts that can sometimes arise for us in meditation, or sometimes through other kind of interruptions in the normal kind of flow of conceptualization. The bardo is also present, kind of in a manifest way, at the time of falling asleep, in the period between falling asleep and the dream state, the dreams beginning to manifest. So when we talk about the bardo, the gap between birth and between death and rebirth, or more properly reconception, we should understand this as not going to some like heavenly realm, or going to some kind of God place, or meeting a god or something. It is actually just the mind resolving into its own fundamental nature, which we call the luminosity, or the clear light. But it's there at all times. This clear light, this basic luminosity, is there, as I say, at all times, even now, if we could but just recognize it. So in that sense, the process of death is just simply that, just mind temporarily settling in its unconditioned actual nature. Now, if we can recognize that nature, that clear light nature, at the moment of the full moment of death, then liberation is possible, which has come about. The possibility of recognizing it depends upon how much we've trained in meditation during life. If we are not able to settle in the clear light as it shines, as it radiates at the moment of death. Inevitably, the karmic imprints which are accompanying the stream of consciousness will begin to become active, and in the death state, in the post-mortem state, and they, out of those, the stirring into activity of the karmic impressions, will come the various experiences, hallucinatory experiences that one has in the bardo realm. But if we can recognize those appearances of lights and rays and drops and so on, if we can recognize them as nothing more than the radiance of our mind, simply it's kind of energetic manifestation of the radiance of mind, then again recognition of the true nature of mind is possible, and with that liberation, with that Buddhahood. But if we are not able, due to the heavy dominance of our karmic imprints, we're not able to recognize these manifestations as simply the mind, then inevitably we're driven on towards rebirth. It's as if the karmic imprints become heavier and heavier in their influence in the after-death state, and that inevitably brings us to rebirth. And rebirth into whatever realm is kind of, as it were, in tune with those dominant karmic imprints that are manifesting then. It's important to realize that actually there are countless karmic imprints that are accompanying the mind stream, but they don't all become dominant after death. It's the ones that become dominant which will force us on to the appropriate rebirth. So if we have the karmic imprints which are in tune with human life, through prior practice of humane qualities such as virtue, we're likely to be reborn into the human realm. But if other imprints become dominant at that time, we will be drawn into those other realms. Again, I should stress, there's no God directing this, there's nobody in charge of it, there's no after-death police force, there's no after-death immigration service. You are just pushed on, as indeed we are in this life. We're pushed into various actions and various ways of thinking by the influence of these unacknowledged karmic imprints that we carry with us right now. And only by decisively looking into the nature of mind and do we cut through these imprints. So we should be training for the bardo, so to speak, right now. And even if we're unable to achieve full liberation during this life, it will mean that it is much easier to do so at the time of the bardo.
What is the proof that there's life after death? One of the main themes of the Quran, quite literally on every single page of the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the concept of life after that. It is one of the fundamental pillars of our religion. It is one of the main things that our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught to the Quraysh, because the Quraysh did not believe that there's life after death. And Allah proved this point in so many different ways through rational proofs. Allah said, look at the dead earth I recreated. Look at the dead plants, life comes out of them. Look at the powerful creation. Look at your life. Surely the one who created you can recreate you all over again. Also, of the evidences that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses are ethical or moral evidence. Allah says in the Quran that, do you think we're going to make the pious and the impious, or the wicked and the righteous equal? In this world, sometimes criminals, mass murderers get away. In this world, sometimes the most evil of the evil seem to live good lives, and they torture innocent people, they kill innocent people. If there was no afterlife, no heaven and hell, no judgment, life would really be unfair, and there would be no recourse to justice. But Allah says He is the just, Allah says He is the infinitely just, and therefore there must be a judgment day where people will be rewarded for their good and yes, punished for their evil. And the Quran, as we said, is full of so many verses about the hereafter, but in the end there will be a leap of faith. It's not a scientific, I can't give you an equation that proves that there's going to be an afterlife, but Allah uses enough analogies and Allah mentions in too many ways, and in the end this is a part of ilm al-ghayb, or the knowledge of the unseen, that we're going to have to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also, by the way, if there were no life after this life, then honestly life would not be worth living. What is the purpose of life and the pain and suffering and misery? Of what use is our very existence? The fact that there's a life after this life gives us hope, makes this life worth living. And of course, it fits in perfectly with each and every way that the Quran attempts to prove. And it is, as we said, one of the fundamental pillars of our religion: Tawheed, Risala, and Akhirah. Belief in Allah, belief in the Prophets, and belief in an afterlife.
Jews believe about the afterlife that it's going to be wonderful, but please don't let's have it yet. That is the really important thing about Judaism. Read through the whole of Tanakh, the whole of the Hebrew Bible, from beginning to end, and you will find that the references to the afterlife are almost infinitesimally small. The references are there, but you really have to search for them. Judaism is an extraordinarily this-worldly, this-life-focused religion. And that's extraordinary because all the religions of the ancient world were religions obsessed with the afterlife. That's what the great temples and pyramids of Egypt are all about. This life is a place of struggle and pain and all sorts of agonies. It's when you die and you go to heaven, then you find serenity. Now, Judaism does not deny that, but it does say if justice is to be done, it's to be done down here on earth. If we are to come close to God, if we are to really grow as human beings, if we're going to make a difference to the world, then let's do it here and now, not in some other world, in some other life. So Judaism believes that the afterlife is the place where souls, after the body reaches the end of its biological existence, are reunited with God. It's a kind of homecoming of the soul. Tzadikim yoshvim v'nehanin miziv hashchina, the righteous sit and are illuminated by the rays of the divine presence. But Judaism remains a religion which, despite its belief in the afterlife, is almost obsessively focused on this life. And that, to me, makes Judaism the healthiest and most life-affirming religion I know.
The absolute basics of the Christian faith. What is the world's great hope? The Bible tells us a lot of things. It tells us who God is, it tells us who we are, but the Bible also tells us something else. It tells us what time it is. Which is to say, the Bible tells us where and when we are in the big story of the world. In Act 1, the story begins with humans in right relationship with God. In Act 2, the story shifts as humans rebel and continue to rebel against God's good rulership. In Act 3, God reestablishes relationship through a series of promises to a particular people. In Act 4, God actually enters the world through the incarnation, becoming a man, Jesus Christ. Jesus lives, dies, is raised, and ascends to the Father. In the last act of the story, Act 5, the true King works to set everything fully right again through the church, and finally returns to fix everything forever. What this means is that where we are in the story is in between Jesus' return to the Father and his return back to earth. We're living between the climax of the story in Act 4 and the resolution in Act 5. God's victory over evil has already happened in Jesus' death and resurrection, but we're still living in the spot of the book before the final resolution of all the conflict. In this sense, we're living in the final victorious chapter, but before the very end. When the page finally turns and we finish the last chapter, the goal that God had in the beginning will be fulfilled. God's original plan, to have a people that he can have perfect loving relationship with, will once again be fully accomplished. And it won't only be our relationships that will be set right, everything will be redeemed. In Revelation 21, John has a vision for a new heaven and a new earth. In the new heaven and the new earth, everything has been rebooted so that it's all in line with God's plan. Death is gone, and sadness, and pain, and God's kingdom is now fully with humans. This is why John describes the holy city descending onto the earth. God's dwelling is with people again. In a sense, then, the return of Christ and the redemption of all things is an answer to part of one of the most famous prayers in the church. In the Lord's Prayer, we pray, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done." We pray for that to happen in partial ways now, but at Jesus' return, it will happen in full. We can imagine it a bit like this. Think about two circles. One is the fallen world, and one is God's kingdom. Because Jesus has come and established the church, there are some places where the circles now overlap, like on a Venn diagram. That's God's kingdom on earth. Right now, the circles just overlap partially, but when Jesus returns, the two will overlap fully. There won't be one tiny bit of our circle that isn't completely covered by God's. The two will be made one again, just like it was in the beginning.